that you will log only from there. You can do it either using the graphical user interface or by moving into the command line. Here we will use the config system admin, and let's just edit the relevant profile, which is admin. Now here we can set different configurations to our admin profile. If we use the show full config, we will see the full configuration, either setting up trusted host or even setting up a two-factor authentication by using an email account. That is possible only on the command line. Alright, so we have our admin account. So now let's move over to network interfaces. And this is the topology that we need to configure. This is a very basic SMB topology. You have your LAN, which is connected to one interface on your FortiGate, and you have your DMZ, where your server sits, which is connected to another interface, and you have your ISP router, which is connected to your WAN interface on your FortiGate, which is this WAN interface. So let's start by configuring the LAN interface and the DMZ interface. So choose your interface of choice, edit. Now name your interface. I will name it LAN, and choose its role. Different roles means different settings, but our role currently is LAN. We will configure the IP address of the gateway itself, that is 10.0.4.1/24. Another thing that we need to configure is the administrative access. We will use HTTPS to connect to that interface. We will also allow ping, and we need a service, a DHCP service that will run on our interface, so that hosts that will connect to our interface can ask for IP addresses, and we will apply that using the pool, which currently is up to 254. We will set it to only 50 IP addresses. You can head over to the more advanced DHCP server and assign scopes, assign specific IPs to match your host's MAC address, but we will not do so. Device detection allows your FortiGate to actually detect the type of devices that runs on your network. That is either an Android, a Windows PC, a Mac computer, and so on. It does so by looking at its MAC address, user agent, TCP fingerprint, and other methods. You can also enable captive portal on your interface. We will not do so. So that's it for our LAN interface. And now let's configure our DMZ interface. So let's edit it, name it DMZ. Now the role will be DMZ, and once you do so, you will see that you don't have a DHCP server on that interface, since as a best practice, do not allow DHCP service on your DMZ. So let's configure its IP address, 10.0.5.1/24. We will only use HTTPS as our administrative access, and that's it. Now we have two interfaces. One is dedicated to our LAN, and the other one is dedicated to our DMZ. Our WAN interface, let's just edit and name it WAN, so it will be easier when we configure our policy later on. Alright, so now we have our interfaces set up, and the next thing to do is to manually configure a route entry that will allow all packets to flow towards the gateway interface, that is our WAN interface, and from there to the internet. So we'll move to network, static route. Let's configure a new default route. Our gateway interface sits on the WAN interface, and its IP address is the 10.0.3.1. We can determine the priority of our static route and its distance using the following configuration, but we will not get into it. You can see I have dozens of videos that are dedicated to the different routing attributes of your FortiGate. Okay, so now we have one static route which actually tells different packets that if you wish to go to just about any destination that doesn't have its own routing entry in the routing table, move to the gateway at the 10.0.3.1 using the when interface. And now let's move and see our new entry, our new route entry that we have just configured. We will do so using the command line, although you can do so also using the graphical user interface. So get router info, routing table all. And there you see you have a new static route that actually points to the default route via the 10.0.3.1 IP address. All right, so we have our interfaces, we have a static route, and the next thing to do is actually to create the policy itself, the policy that will allow packets to flow from interface to interface by matching the traffic and seeing if it is denied or allowed. So to create a policy, we will move over to policy and objects, IPv4 policy, and create new. The first policy that we wish to create is a policy that will allow everyone in our LAN to get out to the internet using any service at any time. So let's just name our policy full access. The incoming interface is our LAN interface. The outgoing interface is our WAN interface. The source, we will not limit users, so we will just allow anyone to get out. Of course, if you need more granular control over your policy, you will create firewall address objects and you will define which one can get out and which one cannot. You can also create user groups and users. Destination, all. We are not limiting the traffic to a specific place. Anyone can get out to anywhere. Scheduling, always. Service, again, we can limit it to specific protocols, but we will keep it to all. Now, the action is accept. The other thing to note is the inspection mode, which we will look at when we create security profiles. We want our traffic to be natted. That is, our traffic currently happens on our private IP addresses, but when we go out to the public internet, we need to translate our IP addresses to the public front interface of our FortiGate. So that's what we will do. And we can configure the different security profiles. We will do it very soon. Now, in terms of logging, we don't want only security events to be logged. We want all sessions to be logged. So we will enable all sessions. Okay. So now we have our first policy, which is the full access policy. All right, so now let's create our second policy for the DMZ. And from the DMZ point of view, let's just allow traffic that comes from the internet towards the DMZ. For our purpose, let's just make it from anyone, but in your environment, just configure it based on your needs, security policy, events, and so on. Destination, all. We can, of course, configure a specific, you know what, let's just configure an ad server. Let's assume that we have a web server that anyone can access using HTTP and HTTPS. So let's name it web server. We will use the 10.0.5.4/32. So we will so it will point out exclusively to that web server. Now the service can only be HTTP and HTTPS. We will use the different security profiles and we will log all sessions. Okay, so we have a second policy that is towards our DMZ, but now the traffic comes from outside towards a specific web server, and we have only allowed the HTTP and HTTP service. Now, once you finish up with your different policies, you will need to apply the different security profiles. For that, you will move over to security profiles, choose the one that suits your security needs. You will probably choose antivirus, web filter, maybe application control if you want to control applications that your users are using. And once you create a security profile and name it, you can enable it in your policy by going to the policy page and select which profile is needed. All right, now the last thing to do is to move to your system settings and choose the appropriate settings that will make you feel good while you administrate your FortiGate, either in terms of how much time do you want your idle timeout to be, how do you want to customize the look and feel of your FortiGate, and do you want to use any other email service other than the FortiGuard email service. So you can do all that. Now, we have actually looked at the basics of putting up your FortiGate in a typical scenario. If you want to learn more, please subscribe to my channel. I regularly upload 2 to 3 videos every week. In today's video, we will look at how to list processes in your FortiGate using the diag top. Coming up. A process that consumes too much CPU or too much memory as the IPS process can cause your FortiGate to have bad performance. So how do you tackle it, and how do you see the processes that are running on your machine? To do so, you'll go to the CLI, diag top. Now, following that basic command, which will display the processes, we can filter it using other parameters. So if we'll use 3, we'll have a refresh time of 3 seconds. Now if we'll use the 10 after it, we'll have 10 lines that are displayed. Now the last thing is the iteration. So let's use 3 for that, and let's see what we have. So we have 10 processes, again another 10 processes, and another 10 processes. Now let's look at the processes themselves and understand what do we see here. We actually see the process name, the process ID, the process state, either in sleep or running or maybe a zombie process. We also see the amount of CPU that your process is consuming, that is the row before the last row, and the amount of memory that it consumes. Your FortiGate CLI is probably your best friend when you're administrating your FortiGate. So, a new series dedicated to CLI tips. Let's start. The first CLI that we will look into today is the get system status. Now, it isn't a fancy command. It doesn't sniff any packets. It doesn't show the different sessions that are running on your FortiGate. It just shows you the information. What is your FortiGate up to? So what can we see? We can see the FortiGate version, we can see the build number, we can see the different security profiles database dates. We can also see the serial number of your FortiGate. We can see if your FortiGate is working in a NAT mode, that is Network Address Translation Layer 3 operating mode, or maybe it is working in a transparent mode, which is a Layer 2 mode. If you are using VDOMs, it will show you. If you are in an HA mode, that is working in a cluster, either in a passive mode or in an active mode, it will also show you. Currently, as we can see, we are not participating in an HA cluster, so the HA mode is standalone. We can also see if we're using a hard disk or maybe we're using a flash disk. So the get system status will show you the most relevant information regarding your FortiGate. Another chapter in 2 minutes CLI, and in this part we will look at the execute log display. How can we show up the different logs categories in the command line? Coming up. Logs are critical to your network stability and your network security. Now, it's a good practice to keep logs for at least a week. You can look at the logs either through your FortiGate or through a Forti analyzer or even a syslog server. Now, in your logs, you have different categories, and we will look at them through the command line. So for that, we'll use the execute log filter category. Now, if you're not familiar with the different categories, just press enter, and there you will see the different categories. So let's just use category 1 for event logs. Now, after doing so, you will need to write down execute log display. And there we have it. Now, it shows up only the 10 last log events. If you want to watch the other 10, just press again and you will see the other 10 log events. FortiGate also shows you that you have 237 logs that are found and only 10 logs are returned. 6.4 is one of the latest releases of Fortinet, and they're doing a great job from release to release, adding new features. And up until now, there were dozens of videos all over describing the new features of 6.4. Well, I've decided to create one that will focus on the more friendly features of 6.4. So let's start. The first friendly feature, is the execute speed test that you can do on your WAN interface. To do so, you'll have to have the SD-WAN network monitor license. Once you have one, you can jump up to your WAN interface and execute a speed test. Now, when you do so, the results will be added to your estimated bandwidth, the estimated WAN bandwidth, but you will have to be connected to FortiGuard and to, I believe, Google's or AWS speed test servers. The second friendly feature is a fantastic one. I've been always asked when dealing with security profiles, which feature is supported either in flow-based inspection mode or in proxy-based inspection mode. And it seems that you, up until 6.4, you had to remember which feature is supported and where. So from now, you can actually create a new security profile. And if you wish to see which feature or which capability is supported under the proxy inspection mode, the only thing that you need to do is to click on the proxy based, and there you will see that you can only use content disarm and reconstruction under the proxy-based mode. The same goes to web filter. Just click on the proxy-based and you will see the features that are supported only on a proxy-based inspection mode. The next friendly feature is actually not a feature. It is a way of describing things much more clearly. So when you go to a network SD-WAN and you add up new interfaces to be part of the SD-WAN interface, and the next thing is to create an SLA, a performance SLA, where you configure the SLA server and the SLA target. The next thing is to go to SD-WAN rules. Now, in SD-WAN rules, at the end, you actually create your SD-WAN strategy. The SD-WAN strategy can be manual, best quality, maximize bandwidth, and lowest cost. I can tell you that every student asks me, what does it mean? What is best quality? What is maximized bandwidth? So finally, Fortinet actually describes each strategy and what it does. The next friendly feature is a cool feature, which is the IP address tooltip. Whenever you hover with your mouse over an IP address, it will show up more information on that IP address. So let's go to login report and application control, and let's see what happens when we hover towards that IP address. Well, we can see that the owner is Google. We can see the location, which is England. We can also see the latitude, longitude, and the running services. Let's go to another IP address, and that IP address also is owned by Google. Let's find an IP address which may not be owned by Google. All right, so we have an IP address that the owner is Amazon, and it seems as the local CDN here in Israel, Tel Aviv. Another friendly feature is the Add widget, which is now much more organized than it was before. You have dozens of widgets. Some of them are new. I believe that the IPsec and the SSL VPN widgets are new. And you have a bunch of Wi-Fi widgets that shows you the channel utilization of the access point, clients per access point, interfering access points, and so on. And the last friendly feature is the fact that you now don't have an IPv4 policy and an IPv6 policy. You only have a firewall policy. You can add up an IPv6 or an IPv4 address object to be added to the source and destination fields in your one policy. You're a small business, very small. 6 employees, 6 computers, 1 switch, 1 access point, an ISP router, 1 subnet, and a network attached storage that serves as a file server. That's right, no domain controller servers, no clustering, everything is flat and simple. But you still want to protect your network assets. You still want to be able to connect to your file servers from remote, give permissions to the management to specific domains, and you decided to buy a firewall, a small firewall, not too fancy. So here are the 7 things you must do in order to start and work with your firewall. All right, so the following are the basic steps that you as a small business will need to do once you get your FortiGate or any other firewall in your business. Now, the very first thing, remember, once you configure your firewall, you're the administrator of that firewall. You're the super admin. So you will need to harden your admin account. You can use two-factor authentication. You can also use an email-based mean to get a token in your email. I have done a video on that before, and you can just click the link above and go straight to it. Another thing is trusted host. You will need to configure either 1, 2, or 3 IP addresses that the admin can actually connect from to the management interface of your FortiGate. So configure your office address, configure your home address. Don't let anyone get into your FortiGate from outside. The second thing that you can do is to segment your network. Now, even if you have only 6 or 10 employees, and 3 of them are in the marketing department, and 4 of them are doing sales, create a new interface. You have lots of switch ports on your FortiGate, and even if don't, you can create virtual LANs. So let's create an interface. Let's just name our interface sales. The role of that interface is local area network. Just assign specific subnet to that interface. This is a private IP address. Use for management HTTPS and SSH. HTTPS to get to that interface through the GUI, and SSH is through the command line, and just configure a DHCP server. Now, you probably have only about 5 to 6 employees, so don't use the full pool. You can use if in our case it's 10.0.9.2, so let's use it up until .10. Now, you can do many other things. We will not get into it right now, but this is the basics of just creating a new interface. And be sure to connect those employees through their computers to that specific switch on your FortiGate, either using a switch or directly. All right, now once you've built the interfaces, you can actually start to configure some rules. Let's just use basic rules for now. We head over to policy and objects, IPv4 policies, create new, and let's just create a sales policy. Now, we're not limiting no one in our sales department. So the incoming interface is sale, the outgoing interface is our WAN interface, the interface that is connected to our ISP router. As for source, currently we will use all, but we will create a firewall address object very soon, and we can actually use it in our firewall policies. In terms of service, we will allow any service, any protocol to go through this firewall policy. We will enable NAT. We will not use currently our security profiles. We will do it soon. And we will log just about every session, not only security events session. All right. So that's our sales policy. Let's create a new policy. Let's name it marketing. And incoming interface is our marketing. Outgoing is our WAN. Source all. Destination all. Service all. Let's just enable logging for all sessions. All right, the next thing to do is to actually create a virtual LAN for our access point. Now, there are times when you need to create another broadcast domain which is on top of physical ports. So if your FortiGate has 8 ports, you can actually create on top of each port VLANs, virtual LANs that you can connect to that switch, and from there to outsource employees or other employees. So let's just use the sales port to create another interface, which is our VLAN interface. Let's name it outsource 2, and we will use a tagging of 300. Let's also use it here. And the interface, as we said, is the sales interface. Now let's configure an IP address as we do in just about every subnet, every LAN that we have. So we'll use the 192.168.2.1/24, and we'll use administrative access, HTTPS and SSH, and we will actually list the full pool in our DHCP server. We will not limit it to only specific number of IP addresses. Okay, now once we have that VLAN on our sales interface, that's VLAN 300, we need to create a policy that will allow any traffic that is coming from that VLAN to get out to the internet. So we will again create a new policy. Let's name it outsource 2. The incoming interface is our VLAN, is outsource 2, and the outgoing is our WAN interface. Now anyone can connect to that VLAN, anyone can go anywhere, but in terms of service, we will not allow any service out there. We will use HTTPS, HTTP, all right, and DNS. All right, now let's just apply that, and now we have a new policy that allows anyone that connects to it to get out to the internet only using HTTP, HTTPS, and DNS. All right, now let's create a firewall address object. Why do we need a firewall address object? Well, sometimes we have different computers on our subnet that we want to limit or to grant access to specific services, and that's a good way to create a policy that is more granular. So to create a firewall address object, we'll go to policy and objects, addresses. Now let's decide that our firewall address object will be for the marketing division. That's at the 10.0.5.0 subnet. And we know that we have a user that has the 10.0.5.3 IP address, and we want to limit it from sending pings, sending ICMP protocol pings.